Chapter 6. My mother, Razia Khan. My uncles were the envy of my mother because they had been allowed an education while she had only been permitted to attend school up to the fourth grade. Girls, even more so then than now, were restricted to the home at a very young age. My mother fought against illiteracy by reading anything she could find and mastered the Urdu language. She said to me, "Life is a gift we have been granted. It's like money that you have been given, and you only have a certain amount of it. You can spend it on anything you want, wisely or foolishly. If you spend it on things that bring you pleasure in the short term, you may lose out in the long term, because those things will deplete your funds more quickly and leave you poor. If you invest your funds wisely, they will not only increase, but will allow you to buy things that are more meaningful. Education is an investment like that." This reminded me of the Burmese saying, "Pinya shwe o lu makho." Knowledge is a pot of gold that no person can steal. She was not able to become fluent in English at the time, but later learnt enough of the language to read English newspapers and communicate intelligibly in it without too much difficulty. She had wanted to become a doctor, and failing to achieve her goal, hoped that one of her children would fulfill that dream. Having missed out on formal schooling, however, did not deter her from acquiring an education. Life brought her sufficient challenges to sharpen her intellect and mold her philosophy in ways that surpassed that of those who boasted university degrees. I asked her when her birthday was, and she said, "Are jane bido, leave it alone." As young children, we never really celebrated birthdays, and I don't remember being wished a happy birthday till I was much older. The tribes in the mountains didn't keep records of their birth date and only had a rough estimation of their age, measured against certain events or incidents. When I learned about the Western fuss that was made about birthdays, I thought it was a great idea and told her that people get gifts on their birthdays, and what was I going to get? She replied, "What you should think about is that you came into this world. You were given life, and you have a responsibility to do the best you can with that life. Think about what you will have contributed that will make you worthy of the life you have been given. Don't think about what you will receive, because you have already been given the best gift of all, and that is life itself." She was born in Yananjiao, and it was probably during the time when my grandfather was stationed there. This would have been after the British had taken over the administration of the lucrative oil wells of that region. When I pressed her for more information about her earlier years, she said, "Zamana ke saath sab kuch khatam ho jata, sab adhura adhura reh jata." With time, everything ends, everything is left unfinished. And then she went on to say, "We look back at past moments in our lives with nostalgia and remember them as happier times. Yet, at that time, we didn't fully appreciate them. This point in time where we are now, we will look back at and be nostalgic about and remember this too as a happier time. We miss out on the opportunity to be happy and appreciative of it in the moment, which is now. We constantly project ourselves into the past or the future when all we really have is now." And then, remembering her firstborn, she said, "Eunice sends me a card every year, but last year he didn't." When I urged her to tell me more about the past, she said, "I've forgotten everything. What can I tell you? Sometimes I don't remember anything at all." How wonderfully kind is the selective process of our minds towards the end, erasing bad memories and vividly enhancing those that were pleasurable. Then she recalled with a smile the occasion when she and my father were driving back to Kalor after having visited my father's younger brother, Mahmud Sheikh, and his family in Taunji. They had not travelled very far when, swinging around one of the innumerable bends in the road, they came across one of my father's acquaintances trying to bike his way home. It was a hot day, and they could see that the back of his shirt was drenched with sweat. They pulled up a little way ahead of him and stopped the car. The man approached them and, recognizing my father, paused and greeted him. His face was flushed, and drops of perspiration dripped down his forehead into his eyes. He was quite short of breath, his words coming out between huffs and puffs. My father offered the man a ride, but he declined, saying it would be difficult for him to accept their kind offer because he wouldn't know what to do with his bicycle. My father said, "Tumhe chahun, tumhare chahne walon ko chahun." Meaning, if I care about you, then I care about those things that are meaningful to you. Whereupon they tied the bicycle to the roof of the car and took the friend to his destination. My mother also happily recalled for me fragments of her life with her own family as a young girl. She said that she and the other children would often climb the hills around Kalor, and she used to run down the hill with arms outstretched, feeling the same sense of freedom as that of a young bird taking its first flight off the branch of a tree. She said there was a path from Pagoda Hill past the Ponji Chowng on the hill that went all the way to Sherbasti, and we sometimes used to go along it to get to the steep face of the Loyan crags and compete to see who could climb up the fastest. As I listened attentively to her, vivid images of her flashed through my mind of her childhood. She never really lost the little girl in her, because she was there each time I looked at her or talked to her. The smile, the laughter, the mischievous twinkle in her eyes and in her voice, even at 85, remained that of a young girl. And though she said that she had forgotten a lot of the things that had happened in the past, her mind remained sharp and alert right to the end. My mother had that indomitable spirit which bore life's burdens not as a cross, but rather as a challenge to be overcome. The fire, the determination, the unconcern with externals remained an essential part of her personality to the end of her days, as did her commitment and dedication to her children. She reminisced one day about the British conquest of Burma and the humiliating defeat and exile of King Thibaw, the last Burmese king, and said, "We build palaces and mansions and strut around in fine attire and conquer peoples of other lands and think that now this is ours. But the land and everything on it eventually goes back to those who really own it, the natives of that country. And when we human beings are gone, it will go back to the jungle and the animals to whom it truly belongs." She must have been about 7 years old, she told me, when she first traveled with her family to Kalor. They went all the way from Rangoon to Yamedin by train, where they disembarked with all their luggage, and then had to undertake the remaining 77 miles of the journey from Yamedin to Kalor by bullock cart because, though the railway lines that ran from Rangoon to Mandalay were functioning by 1889, the section of railway from Tazi to Kalor had not yet been laid. The train ride had been pleasant, and she had slept most of the way, lulled by the chug-chugging of the train as it cut across the delta region toward the central plain. But once they got to Yamedin, the trip became arduous, and it was several days before they reached Kalor. The journey was made more uncomfortable because they had decided to travel during the dry season, around March and April, when temperatures become unbearably hot in that part of the country. They had not anticipated this, but they were left with little choice, for it was better than the other discomforts they would have had to endure if they had waited till May, when the rains would have commenced and would have continued till the end of October and possibly November. During the day, the Burmese bullock cart drivers stopped because of the heat, and we would start traveling again in the evening. As they got into the hilly region of the Shan Plateau, the weather became more endurable, but the hilly terrain wore out the bullocks, so that they had to make frequent stops. My mother said, "My father wanted land in the jungle. He didn't want to buy land in the city." So they traveled, camping all the way till they reached what was then a small village named Kalor. My mother said, "My older sister, who was probably about 12 or 13, did most of the cooking. As we neared Kalor, I could see that my father was happy because he felt at home to be among the mountains again and to be able to breathe in the scent of pine forests. We arrived in Sher Basti, she said, a small village 2 miles from Kalor, with Ivan's mother, and then took this land by the stream. We rented a house which was made of mat and thatch, while our house was being built in Narangi Bagicha. There were a lot of Pathans and many Turks working on the railway. The Turks she referred to were Turkish prisoners of war who had been captured during World War I by the British and transported to India and Burma. The prisoners labored on the railway lines and most of them died there. The better known cemetery where they were buried was in Tayetmio, and little is known of those who lived in barracks in the small village of Sherbasti. The village was so named because of the two giant chindes, sculptures that stood at the foot of the hill, guarding a pagoda on its peak. The family befriended the Turkish prisoners, occasionally sharing their food with them, and the empathy they felt toward them was apparent in the expression in my mother's eyes when she said, "There is a Turkish prisoner of war cemetery in Aungban. This is a little known fact, as most people are only aware of the cemetery in Tayamio. But when the prisoners who were based in Sherbasti died of adverse labor conditions and from disease, which was caused by poor nutrition and non-existent medical attention, they were buried in Aungban, which is only 5 miles away from Sherbasti." My mother said, "They told us not to build in Narangi Bakicha because the stream would flood, but my father had made up his mind and that this was where he would build his house, and no one could persuade him otherwise." Then the rainy season started, and it poured and poured for days and days, till my mother said that it was probably never going to stop. The water in the stream rushed swiftly, energized by the torrential rainfall, and swiftly began to rise. One night the stream rose, and my mother said, "Let's go, it might rise further," but my father paid no heed. In those days, we used to sleep on mattresses which we laid on the floor. And one night, just as we were about to fall off to sleep, my sister suddenly shouted, "Uba, Uba! Water, water!" And we saw that the water had started to seep in through the floor. In a panic, my father raised the mattresses and put them up into high shelves in the house. At that moment, another Pathan, Akbar Shah, an Afridi who had a German wife and who was a friend of my father's, decided to pay us a visit because he became concerned about the fact that we lived close to the stream and it had been raining for several days. He was horrified to see that the stream had flooded and quickly collected a group of workers and set about helping us. He berated my father in Pashto for bringing a family to live in such a place. Then we built a house higher up. When I saw the house many years later, it didn't seem to be on very much higher ground, but its floors were certainly at a level beyond the reach of flood waters, since it had been built on stilts subsequent to that first episode. Access into the house was by a steep ladder made of stout bamboo trunks, and required considerable agility to ascend and descend, quite unsuited to anyone with a vertiginous bent. And then my mother continued and said, "When my mother went back to Mulk meant home country, which was back in the picturesque Kagan Valley in the foothills of the Himalayas," she continued, "she brought back with her brother Ayatullah Khan and his wife. They had 2 sons and 1 daughter. One of the sons worked in the police force. While my mother had gone back to Shinkeri, Zulekha Mami and Ivan's mother, Atharjan, took care of us. All of us lived in Narangi Bagicha at the time, each family having had its own bamboo house built by Burmese workmen, and it was only later that Marjani Khala and some of the others moved to Sher Basti when they had their own homes built there. My uncle Ayatullah Khan also lived in Narangi Bagicha with his small, very young, slim wife, who looked about 12 years old, even though she was much older. She took part in all the games we children played and even climbed trees with us. She died when she was 90 years old. Her hair was short and silky. It was all brown with not a single white hair. Looking at her, I always wanted to cut my long hair and have hair like hers, because when my mother used to comb my hair, it really hurt. Once when I was cutting grass, my thumb nearly came off and was suspended just by the skin. My father took me to Dr. Udham Singh, the same doctor who later was instrumental in arranging my marriage to your father. He took a lot of care to make sure that it would look all right. He said it was important, especially since I was a girl. Zara, myself, Zulekha Mami, her daughter Vilosha, and son Muhammad Jan, and a whole lot of others went somewhere one winter. It was December, and it was Ramadan. We went at night in a bullock cart, and on the way back I slipped and fell when I went to do shushu. I still have the scar on my arm. We came back in time for Sehri, and Zulekha Mami made rotis. All the grown-ups were sleeping. We never used to sit down and listen to grown-ups talking because we were too busy in our own adventures like climbing trees. I remember climbing up the guava tree and picking the last of the guavas of the season, and it was really sweet, and Zohra crying and saying that it was hers. But when I offered to give it to her, she wouldn't take it. If my Mamu brought mithai from Shenkeri, he would give everyone some, including his daughter, who would cry and say that everyone had more than she did. And while she was crying, I would grab her share from her and eat it up myself. In the winter, the whole family would gather and sit around a fire and tell stories, and I would jump from a bed outside the circle onto my uncle's back. While doing this one day, I missed his back and landed on the fire, burning my leg. I think my father died in 1922 during a cholera epidemic. He must have been about 70 years old, but he didn't look it. When we used to go and hug him, his muscles felt like steel and his tummy was flat and taut. He used to teach gymnastics to the soldiers. He taught me how to use a gun and how to ride a horse. He was a keen hunter and excellent at polo. His brother's name was Khan Zaman Khan, and my mother's name was Begumji, and her sister's name was Khanumji. My father's name was Nadir Khan. My mother's elder sister was married to my father's elder brother. I never saw my Nani. And then one day, my mother continued to tell me her story. Allah Pak hame kahan se kahan le aaye? Oh Allah, from where to where have you brought us? She pondered one day. What must have been the first human encounter with cooked food, she said. There was probably a forest fire and burnt meat, which they found to be tender and tasty. She had this knack for tasting a thing and then cooking it so that it turned out even better than the original. The same applied to the pretty clothes she made for us. If we liked a dress we saw, she would cut and stitch the fabric without a pattern and produce a replica of the item, only better. My mother was deeply religious without dogma. She worshipped God through an appreciation of His creation. She did not participate in ritual praying, but hers was a spontaneous response, her soul on its knees in awe of all that surrounded her. She stood with me one day, looking out at the trees behind the house, admiring the way the wind made the leaves tremble. Jhumka ki tarha, like dangling earrings, she said of the birch. Her eyes lit up at the beauty of flowers and hills, at the expanse of the earth and the vastness of the sky. She said, they tell me that every snowflake that falls is different, and that difference is because of the root of the fall. In the same way, each of us, humans, have each come through a different fall, genetically and environmentally. And that's what makes each of us unique and different, not better or worse. In the larger scheme of things, these differences don't matter. Encased in that brittle shell of defensive insecurity, we crack and splinter in misinterpretations and misunderstandings, setting off sparks which ignite bonfires. She continued, most people believe in God in the same way that a little boy looks up to his father, as this wonderful giant who is sometimes kind and sometimes angry. Their belief in God is small, frail, and vulnerable. In reality, it is a God who can fall, and they perceive that He has failed them when what they desire or think is right does not manifest itself. But those who believe in a larger God, one bigger than a father could ever be, one who is beyond our human comprehension, that encompasses and is inherent in all things, if this is the God they believe in, then they are at peace, accepting that which they consider good or bad as all part of a larger plan. It is a difficult concept to grasp, because we are programmed to do good and eschew evil, but a certain amount of evil is necessary for our own survival. Then she stopped and her eyes looked into the distance as if her mind had come up with new questions to which she had no answers. Then she said, "While the earth whirls rapidly toward inevitable oblivion, we wrap ourselves in blankets of religious platitudes which give us the comforting idea that we, this unique species, shall somehow survive forever." She laughed easily at the idiosyncrasies of folks with a twinkle in her eyes, and she discarded stupidity and ridiculous notions, saying, "Dafa karo." A close parallel would be "to heck with it." She had this way of turning words so that Saskatoon became Saskatond, mother-in-law's belly. Or the potluck dinners which ethnic organizations chose to have, she laughed about them, saying, "Ye kya potla potla, apna apna potla leke jao." A potla is a bundle. She never could understand how one could go out to dinner and have to take one's own food. She had been taught to ride horses by her father, Nadir Khan, and she accompanied him on his hunting trips. She also learned from him how to use a gun and taught her husband, my father, how to handle the weapon. She laughed as she recollected the first time my father tried to use a rifle. She said, "He held it up and pulled the trigger, which resulted in his being flung to the ground because he had been unprepared for the backward thrust." She then showed him how to correctly position the weapon, much to his embarrassment at having a woman show him how to do a man's job. She also helped my father acquire the skills of horse riding that her father had taught her. My mother was a fearless breaker of icons. She questioned the patriarchal interpretation of the Quran. Talking to my father one day, she said, "What has Allah got for us women in heaven? For the men you have all these beautiful hurs." And his reply was, "Men read the Quran and interpret it to mean female hurs, but it speaks of companions, and in any case, there were things which meant a lot to the simple desert people. Things had to be explained to them in ways that they could understand and appreciate." Some of the harmless traditions of the early Arabs were retained because people need rituals, and rules were also put in place because there was a need at a time of expansion and chaos. The Islamic Empire was expanding and absorbing people of differing races and cultures. "It will take time," he said, "for people to understand." My mother once said to me, "Don't bind people to you with ties that strangle, just because you're married to them or are related to them in some way. Give them space and behave with them in such a way that they will want to be with you. Don't force them to spend time with you just because you feel they're obligated to do so." My mother warned me against expressing my opinions too strongly and also against opening myself to people so quickly that they could easily make a rash assessment of me. She said, "Don't turn yourself inside out all at once, exposing your inner self spontaneously. Hold yourself back, rein yourself in. People have to be led gently with small steps toward the deeper and larger truth of who you are. Observe and listen before you express yourself. Train yourself so that you remain calm and composed no matter what is going on around you." My mother's first airplane flight had been the day we boarded an aircraft which flew us out of Burma to escape the invading Japanese army. She said that when the plane left the ground and soared above the clouds, she looked down and saw the trees, the houses, and the entire landscape diminishing in size till the people turned into tiny dots and then became so minuscule that they disappeared completely. And she wondered if they could see how their problems, their fears, and their worries also diminished in size from a distance. Then she said the sunlight caught a window pane and flashed a bright reflection clearly visible from the plane. And at that moment she wondered if this was how prayers and good deeds were emitted as flashes of light from the earth, or in some other form of which we are unaware. On another occasion she said she thought that perhaps we were like a cancer that spreads indiscriminately, ultimately destroying the very body it thrives on, or like a virus that does the same. Or were we just a germ that landed here from another planet, which we had already made uninhabitable, and were doing the same here? She questioned the manner in which we use up the world's resources, each of us using up more than we need, building homes that exceed the space our bodies require, encroaching on forests, cutting down trees, invading and occupying the habitat of other creatures. My mother had her share of heartaches in life, and when she heard me complain one day about the trials I was facing, she said, "Think of yourself as a large rock in a stream. Whether the water rushes or it flows over it gently, the rock remains steady, and all that the water succeeds in doing is to smooth out its rough edges. And then the rock becomes either a safe stepping stone or a smooth seat for some tired person to rest on. Try to be that rock." Towards the end of her life, she told me of a vision she had one day. She saw a huge expanse of water with a storm stirring the waves into motion, and all around the shore were multitudes of people, each person clutching an idol of a different sort. Suddenly, a ray of light touched the surface of the water and gradually grew brighter and brighter, encompassing all the people and their idols, till finally nothing remained except the calm waters and the bright light. One of the rare poems she wrote, which I cherish, "ये नफरत की दुनिया मिटा दे, मोहब्बत का दरिया बहा दे, किसी ने ना देखा ना देखेगा कोई, हमेशा रहा है हमेशा वही, ये मजहब के प्रचार करने वाले समझते नहीं ये क्या कर रहे हैं, ये तेरा खुदा है ये मेरा खुदा है, खुदा तो है सबका, मोहब्बत खुदा है." And the translation would be, "Wipe out this world of hatred. Make the river of love flow. No one has seen it, nor will they ever. It has remained and will always remain. Those who argue and discuss religion do not understand what they are doing. That is your God. This is my God. God belongs to everyone. Love is God." My mother was bedridden for the last few months of her life, and physically weak from the chemotherapy and other treatments for cancer, she still remained spiritually resilient. One small bowl of half soup, wrinkled hands and parchment lips, inhaling sustenance for one more day or two, still fierce and diamond bright the eyes, the spirit fire yet intact, but dimming with the brighter sun of that unknown tomorrow. She lived long enough to witness the draining away of the authenticity of her identity in her progeny. And at the end, when they tried to prolong her life with tubes and oxygen masks and dosed her with morphine to reduce her pain, she comforted her children by saying, "Bardash karna hoga." You have to endure. Now she is gone, and so many of them are there on the other side, and I stand here in the middle. And it doesn't matter if I stay now or go. There are as many over there as here. And it's as sad or wonderful to be on the other side. To my mother, I will not let you tumble from my mind into a memory. Just yesterday your kiss was gentle on my brow, your arms around me warm. A simple box encased you, and there you lie beneath the flowers in the blowing, glistening snow. But I am with you still, my hand in yours, and death is but a flower holding you, its petals velvet and its fragrance peace.